preparation and speak about how you should face the interview process as a whole. So who is already starting to prepare, actively prepare for the interviews? Anyone else? So what are you doing to get ready for the big day?
I bought some case study books, going through them and through the exercises.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good.
I'm attending this, first of all.
That's a good start.
I'm also a member of McKinsey, which is a consulting club where they have these workshops on Thursdays, and where you got access to something called Prep Lounge, which is, I guess, something similar to this, where you have access to a lot of cases and the solutions. And obviously speaking to people within the industry, what you should do, what can you do, what should you do different.
Sounds good. This is a good way to start. Now, let me tell you about some of the pitfalls down the road. The first one is over-preparation and burning out. Doing so many cases that, and so close to the interview, that when the day comes, you are not at your best. You're not at the sharpest. You're not at the most creative. And you are even nervous. Unfortunately, many candidates would come in that state. I would have the sense that that person could give more than this. That person is adding no creative insight. It's a very textbook solution. Another challenge is conflicting feedback. I hear a lot of people saying, well, I heard that this structure is good, but then someone else told me that that structure is not good at all. So where does it fit? For example, I heard that this is a variable cost according to one, it's a fixed cost according to another. So what do I do? Well, what you do is you need a rationale for things. So how do you allocate if it's fixed or variable? It depends on your time horizon. So if you have that logic, you can avoid a lot of conflicting feedback. But if you don't, you read something, a framework in one book in Case in Point, and then you read another framework in Mastering the Case, and you may be in doubt which one to use. So whenever you have this doubt, resort to the logic. And there are different ways that are possible to solve a case. But of course, some ways are just wrong. And what happens is a lot of people, when they practice with peers, they really don't know what's right or wrong. That's why after practicing with peers, the ideal is to prepare with someone who can really tell you, well, this is wrong because of this, and this is how you can improve. Another thing that happens is that some people start preparing on the wrong path, focusing on the wrong things, spending too much time on technical details, learning about activity-based costing and going in depth with that, and then spending so much time and energy studying these that you forget the rest. But that's going on the wrong path. You don't need to be a specialist. You just need to have logic and reasoning and be sharp in your quantitative skills. No need to be mastering all the business concepts. Another problem that I see is having a very formulaic approach. For an interviewer, it's so obvious when a candidate goes there and this is a framework. Most of the McKinsey cases cannot be solved using a framework. They can be solved using a structured approach. So some people are too much in a hurry to use frameworks when they don't really apply. And it's very easy as an interviewer, if it starts sounding like formulaic, it's very easy to shift a bit the case and then the framework no longer applies. And so that's why it's of course important that you know all these frameworks, but that's important to make sure that you don't miss out on anything. Because the real framework, you're going to have to build it while you are doing the case. And then finally, I also see some people with excess confidence. When they say, I've done 60 or 70 cases in all sorts of industries, in all sorts of functions, so nothing can surprise me. That's also bad. Because if you think that you've seen it all, you're not going to be attentive to the banana leaves that are everywhere. It's good to have confidence, but it has to be grounded. Confidence is actually very important because, well, better be overconfident than underconfident. Because underconfident is going to make you nervous, is going to consume mental energy while you are interviewing. But also being excessively confident means that you may not be aware of some of the things that are happening in the interview because you think you know the solution. Okay, so given these challenges, how how should you prepare? Well, the best preparation is really a step-by-step preparation. This is not like an exam where a few weeks before you just start reading and memorizing things. It doesn't work. It's not conceptual knowledge that you can just absorb. This is something you need to practice, and you need to perfect with feedback. So that's why it's important that you start early on. Let's see how you could go about that. For the problem-solving skills, the beginning is really to have a good foundation. So not jumping right away to start doing mock interviews and all that. Because if you want to build a tall building, you need to have a layer, a solid layer, so that you can add brick after brick. And how can you do that strong layer? Well, the first thing is start going through the websites of the consulting firms. For example, if you go to the McKinsey website and the client service, you will find a lot of examples about what are the McKinsey type of engagements. And what you will find in the interview is a McKinsey-like situation. So it's going to be similar, the kind of problems that you will encounter. So get familiar with those. And then start exploring the career section where you find videos and you find cases there. And that's going to give you a sense of what a case really is. And that's going to help you when you see other cases out there, understand if those cases are at the same standard as McKinsey. Very few cases have the same standard as McKinsey. There's a lot of cases out there, but most of them are very shallow. And most of them are not what you will find in the real interview. So once you go through the websites, start revising the concepts. Things like the break-even analysis, things like opportunity cost, fixed and variable cost, etc. Don't go too deep on them. You just need they need to be top of your mind. So you don't have to think about them when you are in the interview. And then the third thing, and maybe one of the most important, is really the math. So a lot of people jump to the mock interviews or even to the interviews without really getting the basics right in math. And what is getting the basics right in math? Well, most of all is getting back to the basic arithmetics, reminding how you do equations, reminding how you do divisions, multiplications, and all that. But even more important is having some shortcuts to doing all that. So shortcuts like there are some things that you should know by heart without even wincing. So some fractions. For example, how much is 1 divided by 9? You should not even think, let me do that. No. Intuitive. Memorize that. So what is 1 divided by 9?
0.
Almost there.
10, 9.
Yeah, almost there. It's 11.1111. But anyway, the point is, these things you just memorize. How much is 1 divided by 9? How much is 1 divided by 7? How much is 1 divided by 11? Memorize that. Yeah, it's not so much. It's like 7 or 8 things that you need to memorize. And the chances are, when you are performing a calculation in the case, in the quantitative part, sometimes you need to calculate with 3, 4 steps. And if you have these shortcuts in your mind, you don't waste any mental energy. Well, you may not have a round number as 1 divided by 7, but if it's, 11 divided by 70, well, it's pretty close to this. You know that it's a little bit more, 10% more. So 1 divided by 7 is 14.8, and then you just add 10% more. That's one thing. Another shortcuts are, for example, there's one shortcut which is the rule of 72. Have you heard about that?
How much time it takes for an investment to double its?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the rule of 72 is precisely that, to calculate how much time does it take for an investment to double, or a median investor, or something that is growing at a constant rate. And the rule of 72 is basically 72 divided by the growth rate. So it's an approximation. So in this case, if it's 7.2%, 72 divided by 7.2 is 10. So in 10 years, it's going to double. Of course, it's exponential. So that means that if it's 3.6, how much time is it going to take? Twice as much. So this is an example of another rule that should be pretty intuitive, so that when you arrive at the interview, it's tough if you don't know these things. You're going to spend a lot of time figuring that out, and most likely your interviewer is going to need to help you. So your mind should be free to think about other things when you are dealing with the quantitative part. Really the tough things of understanding, reading the data and understanding that data. What are the implications? How does one piece connect with another? So if I raise something here, what is the effect it's going to have over there? So once you have those foundations right, and by the way, a good thing to practice here is GMAT. Do you know what GMAT is? So it's the exam you need to take when you want to go to an MBA. And the GMAT has a quantitative part that tests some of these skills. So things like trigonometry are irrelevant, but other things, and data sufficiency is also going to be irrelevant. But other things, other problems, it's a good exercise. So if you go to gmat.com, you can have access to some practice, and it's going to be good to keep you fast and nimble. So once you have these things sorted out, then it's time to start really developing your problem-solving skills. And a good idea is to start with case transcripts, because that familiarizes yourself with the dynamic of the interview, right? And you start thinking in a more structured way. So that's a good thing. Which books are you reading at Victor Chang? Yeah.
And then case in point.
From Cosentino, right? Yeah, those are very popular books. Sorry?
They're sort of conflicting on distraction.
Sometimes it happens.
Yeah,
Sometimes
so
even
choose one and stick with that.
yeah, even the structure that they propose is and well, my view is that some of it is really not what I think you would do on a real case. But so that's why I think you need to have a bit of foundation. So otherwise, how do you choose between them? And the websites also at McKinsey, Bain, BCG, they have very interesting cases there. And you already see, if you go to the cases there, I don't think you can apply any framework that is on those books to solve those cases. And those are the cases you will find on interviews. And then you should start practicing cases. So first you read the transcripts to get a sense of how you should think, but then you just need to practice on your own. So don't, a lot of people are tempted just to read the transcript after transcript. Well, you need to feel how it is to struggle with a case. So it's good that you practice on your own. And then, of course, events, a lot of events. The company comes to present, go to these events, network with the people that are there, and ask consultants there, would it be possible to spare a minute just to throw some ideas on case interview? So every opportunity you have, it can make a huge difference. And opportunities, especially with people from the company, because those are really game changer. 5 minutes with a person that is there recruiting can mean a lot in your preparation. Now, once you have this in order, then you can go to the next step, where you're going to really strengthen and perfect your approach. And that next step involves starting with the mock interviews. So you should not start with the mock interviews already here. It's going to be a confusion. You're not going to be prepared. You should start here when you already have a pretty good understanding of what the case interview is about. And then the mock interviews. Of course, when you start with peers, quickly you're going to run into some conflicting feedback. And that's where you need to start thinking a bit critically. So someone may tell you that, I don't know, you're conceptualizing your recommendation was not good enough. Someone may tell you it was fantastic. Well, that's why you really need to understand what exactly is this conceptualization. What makes it a very good recommendation, a solid recommendation? Was it creative enough? Did it really draw the right inferences from the available data? So critical thinking is very important to have here. And then seek some coaching, because that coaching may help you clarify. Once you have done all this and a lot of mocks, then the coaching can give you that final bit of reassurance. And then the final thing is to develop your own techniques. See what works well for you. Ideally, you should keep a preparation book or a preparation log where you write the frameworks that you find useful. And sometimes it's combining frameworks from different cases and different sources. And then on the next case, you add a little bit to it. So you start perfecting a bit your approach. The same thing for the math techniques. Wow, I found this cool technique on how to do quickly multiplications. Let me write it down and then let me start practicing. And this is something that you're going to build and develop over time. And if you do all these things, you can get to the end with a confidence that you did what you needed to. It's a huge difference if you go to the interview wishing for the best. That generally doesn't work. And unfortunately, if you go to an interview and it doesn't go well, it's a problem, because then you have a clearance time where you cannot apply. because basically people think, well, if you had your chance and you didn't do well, why would you do? So unless you have a very, very compelling argument to reapply, it takes at least 2 years to be able to do it. Now, how do you prepare for the behavioral skills? It's all about creating a portfolio of experiences that you are very good at communicating. So we saw that the 3 skills that interviewers are looking for are leadership, drive, and personal impact. So you should choose at least 3 experiences for all of them. Why 3? Well, it's not enough to have 1, because sometimes you can have an interviewer asking you for a leadership example, and then another interviewer asking also for a leadership example. And if you give the same, it's not going to be good, because in the decision meeting, yeah, he also told me that story, but I didn't like, because he didn't think about that. And it's bad. So you should always have at least 3, so you can be safe, and you can give different stories to different interviewers. And now, how do you think about those stories, those experiences? So of course you should pick the ones that are relevant. But once you pick the ones that are most relevant, you should structure them in there's a framework for that called STAR. Anyone knows what it means?
So situational, task, analysis, result?
Almost action, actually. Yeah, so the idea is that you give a context. This is the situation. So I was, I don't know, in this company, and there was a problem. Our product was not selling enough. That's the situation. And nobody knew why. Then you go for a task. Well, my task was, I don't know, find out why. I was an analyst, and my manager asked me to do it. And then the action. So what were the actions that I took? So the actions I created, assembled a team, and I decided to do this, this, and that. And then the results you got. Well, as a result, these measures that I proposed were approved, and then it allowed us to start selling, I don't know, 50% more. So it's important to cover all these things, because if you miss one of those, it's going to make your experience seem weaker. If you don't give the situation, which is the context, the interviewer is not going to understand why that experience is relevant, or why was it challenging. If you don't give the task, they're not going to understand exactly what you did, exactly what was your role in it. If you don't give the action, he's not going to understand what was running in your mind, what exactly did you do. And if you don't give the result, he's not going to know if that was really impactful and meaningful. So you should start really developing your stories around these things, and then it's an iterative process. So once you define a first version, you start pitching. This is something that you cannot do much yourself. You really need to pitch to other people, because you need an independent assessment. So how is my story coming across? Is it convincing? Do you think the experience is relevant? Do you think that I demonstrate this skill? And how am I telling the story? Is it clear, my communication? Is it compelling? Is it an interesting story to listen to? And then you get the feedback. So tell me, what was not clear? What do you think was missing? You get the feedback, and then you refine it. And then you pitch again, and you do this a couple of times. And when you do this a couple of times, you end up, if you do it with different persons, with a pretty strong story to tell. And that's the one that you need to use when you go on the interviews. There is also the personal fit. And the personal fit is different from the behavioral skills. So the personal fit is about you as a person. How do you fit as a consultant? Is it something you like? And why are you choosing this specific firm? Are you motivated to join that firm? So what are the things that you need to think about to convince the interviewer that you are a good fit? One of the things is that it helps a lot is to build relationships. First with the people that are recruiting, so that come to the university, have chats with them, try to know them, and then with the consultants, because they can give you insights in what's going on in the office you want to join, or they can give you insights in how it is to be a consultant, and those things are going to reinforce your fit. You're not going to use them directly in the interview. You're not going to say, interviewer, sorry, I would like to show my personal fit. I fit because of A, B, and C. It's not going to happen. But you're going to do it indirectly. You're going to show that you know what you are going for. Because it's a different thing to have the skills, and another thing is to have the will. And that's what the fit is about. Another thing you should start developing is the answers to some questions that are unavoidable. You need to have pretty good answers to why do you want to be a consultant? And why are you specifically choosing a certain firm? So you're going to use those things, by the way, in the screening process. When you write your cover letter, when you fill the application form, they're going to ask you that. And of course, that's when you come to the interview is also going to most likely ask you that. Oh, so I see your CV, you come from liberal arts. So why do you want to be a consultant? And in 2 or 3 minutes, you need to have a very good answer for that. An answer that cools me down as an interviewer, and it doesn't raise any suspicion. The worst thing you can have is suspicion that maybe this guy doesn't even know what he's up for. And then finally, think about some questions, some smart questions to ask, because at the end of the interview, you always have time for Q&A. And you are not being evaluated on Q&A. But the Q&A gives you a sense of the fit. If you ask your interviewer, yeah, so what exactly do consultants do? It's a very bad sign. Well, you need to have at least a clue, an hypothesis. What you can ask is more specific things about the firm as a whole. I heard about this new thing of McKinsey solutions, and I've researched on the site and I spoke to someone, so I understand that this is how it's going. Can you tell me, have you experienced that? I'm interested in that. Or about the office, specifically this office. So what are the major clients you're serving there? Interesting, wow. And how is your experience in that office? So also ask personal questions to your interviewer. Because your interviewer is a consultant, he likes to share his experiences as well. But don't ask the basic things. And then the last bit is about the business acumen, how familiar you are with the business terms, with the business jargon. You must not be intimidated by these things. And so here the 3 things you need to focus on is, of course, the concepts, the business concepts, and some managerial concepts, where you don't need to go in depth with them, but just understand, what is this thing about? What is, I don't know, scorecard about? What is management by objectives about? So the managerial is also important because a lot of the cases are going to touch upon these different concepts. So if you are familiar with it, you save time and you can focus on the things that are really challenging. Another thing is you should have a sense of what's going on in the world, because this is going to help you indirectly in solving your case. If you have a sense of how is the retail industry, you may be better at actually proposing a recommendation for a retailer that is struggling with competition. And another thing, the trends. Trends also in the consulting firms. There's huge trends going on, more into implementation, more into operations, more into developing client capabilities. For example, McKinsey is building something called the McKinsey Academy, which McKinsey deploys and the client is able to work on a self-service base. Those are very different delivery models. It's very different from 10 or 20 years ago, where it's all about the consultants going to the client and serving the client. Well, now there's an arsenal of tools around, so you should be aware of these things.